Welcome to a podcast. Total Survey Design.
Hello everyone. Welcome back to the Total Survey Design podcast. My name is Hanyap Lee.
And I'm Azdran Soma.
In this episode, we talk about determining an appropriate sample size and why sometimes only about 1,000 responses are needed to provide representative data for the entire United States. I've always wanted to do a podcast episode on this topic. The inspiration came from listening to some YouTube commentaries which express almost in a mocking way that a certain study in a certain article has only gathered 1,000 responses, as if that was enough to get a good sense of the opinions of all Americans.
Sure, for the most part, people unfamiliar with sampling methodology, 1,000 might seem like a ridiculously small sample size. Some might think that to get a good national poll, you will need to get tens or even hundreds of thousands of people to respond to a survey to get accurate representation. But in this episode, we will be exploring how sample size is calculated based on what you want to achieve with your survey. Let's begin by talking about what a sample of a population is.
A sample is just a part of the population that you want to survey. So imagine that your target population is the United States. Your sample is the number of people you survey to get the data that is meant to be generalizable to the entire population. If you happen to sample everyone in the population, that is called a census. The US Census conducts a survey of the United States of America once in every 10 years, but it also costs tens of billions of dollars to conduct. You can imagine why it doesn't make sense to survey everyone in a population for every survey. Not only it is extremely expensive and impractical, but it is also inefficient and unnecessary. Often, surveying just a small proportion of the population could give us enough information to act on whatever the purpose of the survey might be. If you think of various populations that people might want to learn about, such as university students, business customers, or citizens of a city, surveying just a proportion of the population is cheaper and more efficient. You can collect the data much faster.
Sometimes you want to attempt to survey everyone in your target population, such as all the people who attended an event that you hosted. It might be possible since you have a list of contact information of all the attendees. It might also be possible to survey the entire population of a university student body. But in situations like all the customers of a business or all the citizens of a city, it is realistically almost impossible to have any complete lists of the whole population. So, to survey the whole population, it will take a tremendous amount of effort and resources. But even when we have a complete list of the population, it is not easy to get responses from everyone. In fact, it is often impossible. This is okay because surveying just a proportion of the population still gives us good data. You might be curious at this point, how good could this data be if it is just a proportion of the population? Well, with a simple mathematical calculation, we can say a lot about how confident we can be in our findings and how precise they are. One way to think about sample size is that when you can't survey everyone, you need to figure out how many people need to be surveyed so that you can say with a good level of confidence and precision that the data reflects the population. This is what it means to calculate the survey sample size. The formula for calculating the sample size is a bit too complicated to discuss in detail on this podcast, but we will include the formula in our episode notes. To me, it is more important that you understand the idea behind the formula. The most important thing to keep in mind, without having the formula in front of you, is that several key parameters matter when calculating sample size. Now, let's discuss those parameters.
First, you need to determine your desired margin of error or the level of precision of your findings. Then, you need to determine the confidence level. Furthermore, you also need to have an idea of the predicted variance of your questions. And finally, the target population size. I will elaborate on each variable now, starting with the margin of error. The margin of error is essentially how close your findings are to the true average of the population. In other words, the smaller margin of error, the closer to the true mean of the population are your findings. Margin of error can be plus or minus 3%, 5%, and sometimes even 10%. The right percentage depends on how precise you need your data to be. Another way of imagining the margin of error is to imagine an arrow shot at a target with a series of circles surrounding the center. A smaller margin of error would mean that your arrow is closer to the center of the target. The other factor you need to consider is how often you can be sure that the arrow will fall in the area you estimate it will hit. This is known as a confidence level. In other words, confidence level tells us how often you expect your data to fall within the precision range your results have shown. The scientific rule of thumb for an acceptable minimum is a 95 confidence level. This means that if you conduct the same survey 100 times, 95 times out of those 100 times, your findings will be representative of the population. Once you have determined the margin of error and the confidence level, you need to know your predicted variance.
What predicted variance means is that different research questions have a different proportion of responses. For some questions, you can expect that most people will answer response option A, whereas only some will answer B. For other questions, you might expect an even 50-50 split. This even 50-50 split is the most conservative estimate of the predicted variance. It means that you expect about half your respondents to answer A and the other half to answer B. If you want to obtain sufficient statistical power for every group being surveyed, you need to predict your expected variance. With a 50-50 split, you need more respondents since they are equally split between the two options. But with a 20-80 split, you get more people in one box, the box with the 80%. So you actually gather more statistical power to describe the population based on the answers with the same number of respondents. So a survey with a 50-50 split might need over 1,040 respondents to describe the population within a plus or minus 3% margin of error with a 95% confidence interval, whereas a 20-80 split only needs 672 respondents to achieve the same level of precision and confidence. The final variable to consider is population size. But population size only matters to a certain extent. For very low numbers, you need a greater proportion of the population to confidently say that the mean results are representative of the population. But for very large numbers, the sample size is about the same.
Consider first that you want to precisely figure out the opinions of 3 people. If you only ask one of the 3 people, the views can vary wildly, so it is not possible that you can be confident that surveying just one person will be very precise. Surveying 2 of the 3 is also not enough to get the view of all the 3. Therefore, you really should be asking all 3 people. As the target population size grows, the proportion of the population that needs to be surveyed goes down. For example, if you want to survey the views of the workers of a small office of 100 people on an issue that might be split 50-50, you still need to survey 92 people or 92% of your population to be able to say with 95 confidence that your findings are within the 3% of the true mean of the population. But if you're surveying an office of 1,000 workers, now you need only 517 responses or 51.7% of the population for the same precision and confidence. If you're surveying a large company of 10,000 workers, now you need to only survey 965 people or 9.65% of the population for the same level of precision and confidence. As the target population size increases, the proportion that needs to be sampled goes down until eventually the number of people you need to survey reaches 1,067, which is enough to describe a population of 1 million or more. So, if you survey 1 million people or 567 million, you only will need 1,067 for the same level of statistical precision. However, I would imagine the idea of needing just over 1,000 responses to be representative of the whole population would still be a bit hard to accept for many. That is why I want to spend more time focusing on this concept.
Here's a great example from Ashley Amaya, who is now Associate Director at Pew Research Center. She posted this example on behalf of the American Association for Public Opinion Research on a Reddit forum about 4 years ago. Let's talk about M&Ms. Imagine that you want to get a sense of the ratio of colors produced. According to M&Ms.com, about 400 million M&Ms are produced each day. Now, we don't need to observe all 400 million M&Ms to determine the ratio of colors. Instead, we could observe just a sample of M&Ms. Intuitively, since there are 6 colors, we need to have a sample that is big enough so that each color has a chance to appear in the ratio that it exists in production. We should probably examine a sample that is bigger than just a handful. I would guess that if you took 3 or 4 large bags of M&Ms, you would get a good sense of what the ratio of M&Ms is in every bag produced. It's just the same with gauging the attitudes of the entire US population. If you conduct the survey properly, and you give the entire population an equal chance of being randomly selected to complete the survey, this is also known as a simple random sample or a probability sample. And if your survey does not suffer from other major survey design flaws, then statistically, the variations of the answers between 1,067 respondents will vary in such that in total, you can with 95% confidence say that your results are within 3% of the true population mean. You can add another 1,000 respondents, and if your previous responses were collected soundly, then the next 1,000 respondents will not significantly influence the means of your findings. It is like with the M&Ms. Once you have gone through a few large bags, you can add another large bag and another, but counting the new bags and the M&Ms within them will not significantly influence the ratios of the colors that you've already counted. The mean findings might change by a percentage point or two, but not more. That's why, with about 1,000 respondents, you can get relatively accurate data that could potentially represent a population of the size of the United States of America.
If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes, contact us at totalsurveydesign@gmail.com. Total Survey Design is all one word. This episode was recorded at the Dimensions Lab at the Washington State University Library. We would like to acknowledge the help of Tom Allen at the SESRC. Also, a thank you to Don Soma. The music for this episode is called Kalimba Relaxation Music and was created by Kevin MacLeod and licensed under a Creative Commons license.
Don't forget to subscribe.